It's really strange. Okay, it's working now. Hey, sorry about that, folks. I just did the whole intro. No one can hear me, so I will do it again. You know what that means? It's a really good chance when we bring Tony on in a second as the guest that you all will. I'll need to reset the audio for that as well. So just bear with me. I'll tell you all out there a little story about why that happened, which is that my computer decided it was a time to update to Windows 11 without really asking me. So I guess maybe I had some settings set in such a way that, I did grant assent to this Windows 11 upgrade, but I didn't not like knowingly give my consent to to Windows 11, and so I think that's probably I've seen the chat hashtag Yeti 2022. I have a feeling that the Windows 11 update is the culprit for what just happened, but I could be wrong because the audio mixer had a Yeti mic in it. It just wasn't actually working, whether I unplugged it, plugged it or not. But it is now. So I'm gonna do all that again. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here, even with the technical difficulty, the audio difficulty. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're probably gone because we're streaming to my YouTube for the first time tonight. It's Holy Happy Hour Batman. I'm Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest. I'm co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. And on this show, I'm joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, game design, philosophy, the glitches of that happen when you stream, and whatever else comes up. So I just gave this whole introduction to our guest tonight that you all missed. But what I said was that if you're active out there in the indie TTRPG scene, if you're on TTRPG Twitter, if you're on Twitch in the TTRPG scene, you probably know our guest tonight. It's Tony Vasinda from Plus One Exp. We're gonna bring Tony on to talk about, well, first of all, Through the Void is being crowdfunded right now, and so we're going to talk about that game. We're going to talk about OSR games. We're going to talk about the indie industry in general, crowdfunding. Maybe talk a little bit about some alternatives to Kickstarter, and we'll see what else comes up in the conversation. Plus Philadelphia, because we're both from the Philly area, so I'm excited about that. So a few things before we get into the show. Holy Happy Hour Batman is a production of allportsopen.com, except for when there's glitches, and then it's just me. Check out our website, allportsopen.com, for our great lineup of podcasts and streams. Shows like the hit horror audio drama Weeping Cedars, my own teen superhero show Delinquent Comics, and so much more. Last week, I didn't have a Holy Happy Hour Batman episode, so I did not get to plug my new Wednesday night stream. It's called Big Time Space. It's on the All Ports Open Twitch channel, twitch.tv/allportsopen. We have our own YouTube channel you can subscribe to. And speaking of OSR, it is a comedy sci-fi game. And we're going to be playing the game Troika, which is a really awesome game in our own unique sci-fi setting. So last week we played a narrative city building game that's really, really cool, called, I'm Sorry, Did You Say Street Magic? That's the name of the game. It was awesome. We did a lot of world building, and basically the premise of Big Time Space is that our cast is playing the ship and stage crew for the galaxy's biggest ego in pop and rock music, who calls himself Big Time Space. And so they're the stage and ship crew traveling around the galaxy on tour, trying to clean up his messes, keep him alive, pay off his debts, that kind of thing. That's Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time at twitch.tv/allportsopen or on the Big Time Space YouTube channel. I'm excited. Some of our cast of Delinquent Comics is on there. Ashton and Connor from Delinquent Comics and myself. Even Sean from Delinquent Comics shows up as the announcer at the beginning of Big Time Space. So if you missed the first episode last week, check it out because it was a really fun world building episode, and that game is really good. Maybe I'll ask Tony in a few minutes if he's ever played it. So by the way, before we get into the actual interview, I know we're starting this one out a little late, but it is still Holy Happy Hour, and that does mean we have a drink up on the screen. Now, I wanted to create a cocktail inspired by Tony, as I always do by our guest. I decided to go with the theme of Tony's game Down We Go. I called this one Down Into the Deep. Down We Go is a OSR game. We'll probably talk about it in a minute with Tony. I was trying to think, how can I translate a game like Down We Go into a cocktail? And so I thought, well, there's nothing more old school Renaissance than doing an old fashioned. And so this is a like, but I wanted to do something. I feel like so many OSR games have sort of a metal feel to them. And I thought, well, you know what? How can I make a old fashioned a little more metal? So I actually added this spicy bitters. I don't know if you don't have access to the bitters that you can see on the screen, which are like a smoked pepper bitters, which is really cool. It's kind of smoky and spicy. There are like a whole bunch of different brands of hot bitters you can get. So it's basically just rye whiskey. It's just an old fashioned, like using a sugar cube and everything, but with spicy bitters. And then I'm recommending that you, if you have access to it, to use crystallized ginger as a garnish with like an orange zest together to like make it a little bit extra spicy and kind of different. So that's the cocktail for the week. Down into the deep. If you remember, the rule I have is that if you try this cocktail, you have to tell me about it. That's my rule. Some people have told me about trying some of the cocktails, and no one's complained yet. So if that's your thing, give it a whirl, see what you think. This one's really easy. You just need to have rye whiskey and a couple other things. So not a hard drink to make. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Tony on the show. He's been waiting long enough. Bear with me because there's probably going to be audio problems. So let's see. Faster for all right, folks can hear me. I'm bringing Tony's audio up on the screen right now. I mean, up onto the feed right now. I apologize everybody for that. That's true, Tony wasn't actually talking, but let's see if I can fix it. And headphones output. Tony, you should be hearable now, I believe.
Hey, I don't know if I'm hearable or not, but my name is Tony Vasinda. I'm a chief alchemist over at Plus One Exp, and we multi-class in tabletop game design, beard and skincare alchemy, and the Bardic College of Content Creation. We helped amazing designers find great players who love their games, and amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. And we do that in a lot of different ways. We're probably going to talk about some of them.
Yeah, there you go. So Tony is an expert at doing that pitch. I've heard you do it a ton of times on different streams. You've got it down to
I'm not allowed in some streams to be the first person to introduce themselves. In some streams, they make me go last so that other people won't be shamed by my ability to rattle off my pitch in no time whatsoever. I'm super excited to be here. And I do have both crystallized ginger. We've also recently gotten very into, we picked up a ginger liqueur that we've been doing a drink called a Gold Rush with a lot, which is kind of a take on an old fashioned. It's usually an ice drink that you use bourbon or rye with, ginger liqueur. And then you use about an ounce of squeezed lemon. It's kind of like somewhere between an old fashioned and a Moscow Mule.
Yeah.
But it's super intense because there is no mixer that goes into it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I have had a version of that. So do you happen to know, so Tony and I are both from Philly area, so we can talk some Philadelphia here probably. But you don't happen to know New Liberty Distillery, do you? It's a Philly distillery.
So it's the one that we have their whiskey upstairs, which I would say their whiskey is almost more like a Scotch because it is a traditional Dutch style single malt whiskey.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they do a spirits club, which I'm a member of, and you get like a spirits box every month, and they usually do a theme, and they usually do like mixers and like send you like recipes and things. It's pretty awesome. Since you can get it delivered, anyone in Philly who watching this can get it. I recommend it to someone who can, because they'll just deliver it to you every month. They'll charge your card and send you a box with spirits in it every month. But it's really fun, and they have like a location in the city where you can like go and drink. They just opened their tasting room, so they'll like throw some drink tickets in the box, and you can go get a free cocktail or whatever. The point of that was, I know, which is that I'm pretty sure one of the months the version of the Gold Rush was the drink for the month.
Yeah. No, but it's pretty cool. We had them one night. My wife was like, "This is too intense," so I put in liqueurs with ginger beer lately.
Gotcha.
But then also the way the bottle for the ginger liqueur is, it got stuck on there for like 3 weeks. So we wanted them, but it took me 3 weeks to get that lid back off before we could finally do it. So we set them again for a second time the other night. They're super good, hot or cold outside, because you got the kind of warm burn of those spirits together, but the nice kind of cool of the ice and the lemon. It's a good drink.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. Well, if you do try the one I made for tonight, make sure you let me know. I don't know if you have spicy bitters, but.
And I'll let Marcus, who's the lead designer on Down We Go, know about it also too. So I don't have spicy bitters, but I do have plenty of spicy stuff in my house, and I might be able to get pretty close to it also.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like you could just do it. I guess if you just did it with regular bitters, it would just be an old fashioned. But with crystallized ginger, maybe as the, that's not really too different. But yeah. Well, anyway, speaking of, welcome to the show officially.
Yeah.
And I know another Philly thing I was going to talk to you about. We can just cry right here. I don't know if you're an Eagles fan.
So I've been in Philly for a little over 2 years, which means most of the time I've been in Philly, I've been stuck inside. When we go out and we do go out to eat, I am not a Cowboys fan, even though I'm from Dallas, Texas originally. I really don't care about football, which is a little bit of a Philly crime.
Nah, it is what it is. Lots of people, you're certainly not the first guest on this show who I've talked to mentioned sports too. Whenever someone comes from Pennsylvania, basically, unless I know they're not into football, I usually bring it up. And
my wife's from Pittsburgh, so that matters.
There you go. Yep. Yeah. So and namely when I've had Pittsburgh area guests, we'll talk a little bit about Pennsylvania sports. But yeah, the Eagles are out of the playoffs, which is all I was going to bring up. But if you don't care about football, then it's neither here nor there.
I weep for the people of this city and for their lament. While not actually caring about football.
There you go. Exactly. You can love your city without caring about the football team.
Yeah. So if you ask me if there's a football team I care about, there is one, and that is the Seattle Seahawks. Okay. I lived in Seattle for a decade before I was here, and it dramatically impacted how my workers felt about their day, including my boss. I also have a background in church work, and so my priest, it was like the saddest I've ever seen him. One time I was like, "How are you doing after a particularly bad loss?" And he just like shook his head, like tears as he like walked out the door, like couldn't even respond. But they're also super invested in their city in some really positive ways. So I really love the way the Seahawks is engaged with the local community, and it was enough to make me be like, "All right, I care about this sport team." I mean, like, they were winning, which also helps, but I don't actually follow a lot of sports, period. But it's the closest I've come to caring about a sports team.
This is gonna sound terrible, but I cared about the Seahawks a little bit this year just because I had Russell Wilson on my fantasy football team, and then he got injured for almost the entire season, and so therefore I moved on. And but that's self-serving, very self-serving. So let's see. Moving out of sports, since that's not even a relevant topic here. Yeah, well, I want to talk about. You mentioned the church work already, and that's one thing before we talk about church stuff, I want to give you a chance before, and I don't want to lose track of it. Pitch us a little bit about the game, because you got a game crowdfunding, and whenever someone is crowdfunding a game, I try to give them a chance to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Through the Void, which is the beta is itch funding right now. So Through the Void is the sister game, the spiritual successor of the game we just funded last year, Down We Go, which is still finishing up print right now. We're getting new pieces in every day. We're getting them edited down. We're getting Down We Go ready to go out the door and to backers across the globe. That's a minimalist fantasy setting set around the city of Empanopolis. That is a deconstruction of the OSR by Marcus Linderum. So it is OSR, but it does a very different take on character creation and a couple other pieces that just sung to me. So I helped Marcus develop that game from a one-page rule set into what's going to be a 64-ish page book, softer hardcover, whatever people want to do. But we brought in this global team of creators around that to create these very small one-page dungeons that go with it, that you can revisit and other stuff like that. Instead of city procedures, some factions, some rumors, a bunch of other stuff to just create a fuller game that you could get up and play in no time. Through that editing process, like, I'm a huge fan of science fiction and sci-fi, and so like I was like, I want to take all these great things we're doing and throw them into the inky void of space. And so Through the Void was my articulation of that. And so it was sitting down and saying, okay, what, like, I love harder sci-fi. So I want something that's a little bit more retrofuturism, somewhere more in the Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica, Firefly range of things, and necessarily in the Star Wars, Star Trek directions. Though you could play in either of those genres, and we have had people play in either of those genres using the system. But all the rules fit on one piece of paper. The core rules that a player needs to know fit on one piece of paper that includes your character sheet. It's actually just an A5 sheet, so it's like a half sheet of paper. The other side has like an inventory list and some basic GM rules. And then we just finished our ship rules. We're still doing a little bit more play testing on them, but those are also just one sheet of paper. And you can build out your whole ship based on that with the combat rules and other things, and a kind of a keeper sheet for your ship. But we're adding in, again, same thing, factions, the space station that everything's kind of based around, that you can kind of launch out of and go explore old lunar labs or salvage, or scavenge. Which is salvage is apparently a combination of scavenge and salvage.
Yeah, of course.
Like old Leviathan class ships, and cut them up and look for treasure inside of them. You can rescue or not people who have gone, drifting through the void, whose ships are derelict, but you have to watch out for all the dangers that come with that. And there's this constant like parallel when you're out in the void of what's around you is dangerous and lethal and may kill you at any moment, and a small sheet of metal, maybe all that separates you from, suffocation, back to the station, which is a mix of cultures and places where every sentient form of life has kind of found home, and is kind of lives out of. And there's this huge crush of humanity there that's all just kind of clustered together, and trying to just make it through the day together. But a ton of great people, some people you've had on the show before who are helping do some content for that.
Oh, cool.
And just, it's been really fun to build out. And one of my favorite things about the system that we ended up calling it the Together We Go core system, is because there was a lot of unitive realities that we were building around in it, which was a really fun thing to kind of bake into the system. You can sit down and make your own Together We Go game without collaborating with anybody. But for us, a huge part of what made the project and the system development so fun was it was so collaborative, and we gave pieces over to very different voices than mine or Marcus's to create big chunks of the game. And what we did was just kind of integrate that back in and say, how does this affect the overall tone of the game? And rather than making it bland or blasé, which I think happens a lot of time when people are looking at OSR tropes, it made it rich and layered and dynamic and interesting. And so it's been super fun to, as we're finishing up Down We Go, to be working on this 20-page beta, which will be those 2 core rule sheets, some factions, some things for the station, some events and other stuff like that, along with a couple of what we call drifts, which are like these 1-page dungeons. Everything is player facing. Which means that the GM doesn't make any rolls. They help manage the narrative. They're not out to get you, though. You will kill a lot of players as the GM, but you're there really to say, here's what's happening in the world, and invite the players to tell you, to respond to it, but also speak into it through the lore's loot system and building out rumors and telling you as the GM some of the realities of the world also too. So it's a very collaborative experience as you kind of build out the world together.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I love that collaborative aspect of it. I love the like building out the world stuff. That sounds awesome. One of the things I like about, and I haven't played any Down We Go yet, but I love the idea of like rules fitting on one page, like for like I think that's just. I was actually telling my wife about that game right before the stream tonight, because she was asking me, what are you talking about on Holy Happy Hour tonight? And I said, well, I don't know entirely, but let me tell you a little bit about Down We Go. And I was telling her, like, it's cool because you could just, like you said, read it on one sheet. And I like the idea that Through the Void, same thing for like, you said like ship rules and stuff. The fact that those can all boil down to like one page. I don't know what you think, like what the trend is exactly in, because she had never, so the conversation basically was she had never even heard of OSR games. And I was like, explaining a little bit about that idea of what OSR means. But I was wondering sort of, and I'm curious what your take is on this, like the trend of OSR in indie games right now and the popularity of OSR in TTRPGs. Is it so much, I'm wondering if it's like even OSR exactly, or if it's just like that games that are easy to learn, fast to learn, easy to understand, that's sort of what the trend is and like where the scene is right now.
I mean, there's a couple design currents running through it, right? So you've got minimalist games, which OSR games oftentimes are. They have because I think the core thing that I would use if somebody was like, tell me what the OSR is, or give me something I can read that'll help me understand OSR, I would send them to the Principia Apocrypha, which is written by Ben Milton of Questing Beast and a few other folks that kind of put together these ideas of here are some of the core tenets, which is high lethality, lower power level, the answer not being on your sheet, but really more being about that. Player choice mattering, telegraphing danger so that when you do bring a lethal response, it's never like, oh, how did that happen? But there's no question of balance or anything else like that. If players want to get into a problem, they can get into it. And if they want to talk their way out of it instead of fight their way out of it, they might be able to do that also too. Really kind of taking the rails off and letting things be creative. And I'm going to compare these to a couple other things. We have traditional games, which old school gaming certainly falls into. And this is like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, things that are very linear, modular. Lots of things are nailed down. We have story games and lyric games on the other end where they're very open, very free. But story games, which are games usually about telling a certain type of narrative at the table, could involve combat, could not involve combat. Those games are oftentimes, you're going to put the game on rails to tell a certain story. The thing that OSR does potentially better than anything else is say, we actually aren't putting anything on rails. We're going to create a conceit for why these characters may be together, but even that isn't going to be through backstory. Literally, that conceit can be, you're all standing outside of a dungeon that you're about to go down into. You can know nothing. When I run Down We Go, when I run through the void, typically when I run it, I will start by saying you stand in front of and then describe the gonzo, whatever place they're in front of. It's just four figures. I don't even describe them. And I say, let's find out how you got here. And I just implement a flashback to say, all right, we're going to go back to when you were in the city. Like, you've all been called to this location. Tell me who we see approaching this location, which may or may not be the four figures, because I've had people die before they get to the dungeon because they decide they want to get into trouble in town, which is fine. It's one of the reasons why we're just saying, we all know we're going here, but I don't know how you got there. What I do is I might roll a random faction, look at what that faction wants, look at the dungeon, the one-page dungeon that I pulled out, and say, why would this faction want these people to go to this dungeon? And then that's what they're going to ask them to do. They're going to incentivize them with coin or riches or wealth or threats or any other way to get them to go down into that space. We'll role play through that process. But because we've already started there, the conceit is, especially in a one shot, well, we know that's where we're going to end up. Through that opening process, they're able to start discovering things and articulating things about their character. If they want to steal, well, why do you want to steal from these people? Have they wronged you? Have they done something to you? None of that was written in a backstory, but once the player has said it, it becomes a part of the narrative. Okay, so you have a problem with the sinuous rills, those who want to break the lines of the city and redistribute everything. Where did you run into them in the past? Why is that a problem? Are you somebody who strongly represents law and order? Did they take something from you? Are you jealous of the fact that they're beloved in the city by some? Like, what is it about this that makes you do this? Or are you just poor and you're hungry and you really need some coin? Like, what is it? What is motivating this? And it's not long and drawn out. It's just an opportunity that they have to be able to say, this is why I'm doing this. And it starts to build that character a little bit more naturally in the rhythm than starting out with a huge backstory, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the things they have in their pockets will be like, okay, yeah, like, you've got a flower that only blooms at night. Great. Where did you get that? Tell me a little bit about that. And all of a sudden, what they're naming is going to build out a little bit about the lore and why it matters all of a sudden, right? So, we might figure out this is why they're there. The first public play tests we ever did of Down We Go, we ended up identifying that in the city that we were playing in our version of the city for that arc, there was this intense bureaucracy around who got to go down into dungeons. And so, like, somebody had forged paperwork saying they had rights to loot a dungeon, and had made up a religion, but then there was actually, that religion actually existed, and there was a cleric in line for that religion, like three spots behind him, who heard him talking about that. So they called him up. It was like, okay, we're going to just put you guys together and you're going to go down into that. But paperwork became a huge part of what we talked about. Did people have the proper permits to be in here? Like, what happened when we brought in new people? Did we have to add them to the permits? Like, all of these things became a weird thing, and this weird bureaucratic tone.
Yeah.
popped up in the middle of the game that was not written in any way, shape, or form, but we didn't have to fight against, right? And it wasn't something that was just a throw off. Like, it was something that we as players and GMs kept on coming back to in little bits, oftentimes comedic, but sometimes with heavy-handed things of like, okay, well, what do you owe the bureaucracy once you've looted this? Like, do they take a tax? Do they take a cut? Like, how do they maintain? You know, like those types of pieces. And so the kind of procedural and iterative process of the way it's built gives you very core rules, and then let you kind of just open up and start exploring things in really wild ways. And so we kind of cranked that to 11, and down we go. So like we ask the players questions about what they're going to find in the dungeon before they even go down, and that shapes and molds what they find out in the dungeons as far as loot and monsters and other stuff like that goes. So even though we have a good preconceived notion for what that looks like, every time we ask them a question, we're giving them the ability to speak something into reality about the world in which they're playing, and we're honoring that choice as the ref for the game. And so like I love it, and I love taking that, like I said, and kind of throwing it into the darkness of space and through the void. I added in backgrounds which are not races, they're jobs. There's one called an andromorph, but that basically is like a cyborg that was not a thing, that gives you a once a day ability. Let me kind of do some 0 level stuff, and it's something I'll probably hack into Down We Go and put out as a digital release at some point. It's like 20 different backgrounds that you can choose to be for your character. And we're adding alliances in. We obviously added in ship rules. There's all these different pieces that we're adding in that are really just fun to mess around with. But the layering on it has just been amazing to watch creators who are collaborating with me do some of that stuff, as well as adding my own voice, kind of to my own iteration of what Down We Go did so well.
Yeah, and it's itch funding right now, right? I posted the link to itch, but
it's funding over on itch. We are, before we went live, we were like $10 or $15 away from our next goal.
We gotta get it right now. Then I don't know what that goal is, but everyone who's watching this should go and do some support on it. Tell us a little bit about how itch funding works, and why you are itch funding the game.
Yeah, so it's a great time to talk about it because there's a thing happening next month called Zine Month, which is kind of a replacement. Kickstarter used to run this thing called Zine Quest in February. They've moved it to August, kind of at the last minute. A lot of people had projects set and ready to go. They also waited a long time to announce it. So Fairlandy Studios and some other folks have come along and just said, hey, no matter what platform you're running on, we want to bring some attention to zine length RPGs. So if you don't know what a zine is, for anybody out there watching, it's a book about this size. It might be black and white. It might be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, but it's a simple kind of staple bound half-page book. And they're people releasing amazing games across a ton of platforms that are going to link through this process called Zine Month. But itch funding is a process of crowdfunding a game that is, I think more humane. Crowdfunding is an incredibly stressful, incredibly high risk thing for everybody oftentimes involved, and not an unreasonably high risk, but definitely a hey, are people going to follow through on this? What's happening with the global paper supply right now? Can we make shipping happen? And it can be really challenging. Itch funding is you're not going to hit the same big numbers, but it lets you kind of slowly build things out. So we're not itch funding the final run of our game. We will do that on a crowdfunding platform, but we're itch funding the ability to start building our game more intentionally, so that when we go to release the game in print and when we go to do that bigger funding campaign, it'll already be done. So we're actually funding short little parts of the world, additional things that we want in there, so that we can make a 20-page version of the game and just get it out to people and get them playing it, get their feedback, get their input. And so that's what we've been building through this itch funding campaign. So about every $150 we unlock a new thing. So it was ship rules were one of the first ones, a dungeon that my friend Kristen is going to be doing. It's on a space station, so we kind of built the world this time rather than like one person doing factions and one person doing events and holidays and one person doing businesses. I basically am having a number of creators create 5 or 6 things that are kind of connected. So we have like Adira Slattery, one of my good friends, was like, I want to add crime to this universe. And I was like, please do. Please create a bunch of criminal syndicates and horrible NPCs that players can be indebted to, and a bunch of other stuff that we can kind of throw into that. So like about every $150, it gives me the ability to take something that normally would have been in that full funding campaign and say, we are going to go ahead and make this now, so that we can start doing it. It gets us closer to that funding goal faster. It lets me focus more on just the total development of the project and just the core pieces. And it gets us, it gets the game into people's hands playing it sooner, which for me is always the goal. Like I don't make games so that no one plays them. I make games so they can be played. And the sooner we can do that, I think the better for everybody. But you can put as much energy and effort into an itch funding campaign as you want, because I put up the core rules. We just released our kind of first slice of our beta, but we'll have a full beta at the end of this. But people could go ahead and buy the final version. So if they wanted the digital version now and they know they're going to have to wait 6 to 8 months to be able to necessarily have that, they could go ahead and pay that now and know that they're going to help the game get to that point, rather than us having to slowly get to that point and then give it to them and then get feedback.
So if they were going to pay that now, what is that? How much is that?
It's $12, which is actually it's one of the bigger things I do. But for digital, I have a hard time going higher than 12. Sure. It's probably worth $15 or $16 or $70 digitally. But I really just again, I want people to be playing. So it's the core rules are $1. Which you can use with any mothership or a space module or old school dungeon that you want to throw down and pretend like it's in space. You can do that, right? If you want to pay $5, you're going to get the full beta version. If you want to pay $12, you're going to get the full digital version whenever it's done, which means all the iterations of the beta in between also too. There's also an $80 level where there's only 6 of it here, and it'll be more expensive on the final campaign, but the $80 level, you can create an NPC, which could be modeled off you, could just be one you like. That'll go into the game with a credit to you also too. So you get to kind of insert yourself, and then you get to play a game with me and some other people.
Nice.
Also too.
That's really cool. So just to be clear, if someone did what I just did, which is buy the game for $15 right now on the itch, like I just did, that means that when the full game comes out, they'll get the full game automatically. They don't have to do anything else because
Correct.
They paid the $15. Is that right?
And ZW Golf also backed, so
nice.
we busted through that. So now we're gonna have the Rose segment come out, who's one of my favorite collaborators. I'm super excited about having Nora do a piece. But yeah, you're gonna get the full game. So cool. when we go, because the thing is, like when I go to print, and it was really funny. We used GameFound, which it's only the second RPG to run on GameFound. Which is it's a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, but it only does tabletop games. They're based out of Poland, but they've got staff all over the place. But they are game creators who were doing a lot of work on their own, who created platforms that let them be successful, and then they made them freely available to other people. GameFound does take a percentage now, but it's lower than a lot of other places, and I think it's a way better crowdfunding platform for a number of reasons. But I really thoroughly enjoyed my experience funding on it. But that'll be for print, right? So that'll be the print one that'll come out. And if people didn't get the digital, they'll be able to get it then also too. But if they already did, they can just get the physical, or they can be like, hey, because we did a cassette with music the first time around and some MP3s. We're gonna do the same thing. This time around, we'll have shirts, we'll have pamphlet adventures that come out with it. We'll have other things that they can come in and say, oh, cool, even though I've already got the digital, I can come fund and support this later on and help these other extra things happen. So, but if you pay the $12 now, you're going to get all of the core content that gets unlocked through our development of this. And then eventually whatever that print funding campaign does, the final version of the game that goes out to those backers, y'all will get as soon as they get the digital version, you'll get the digital version too.
Very cool. That's really cool. That's a cool way to handle it.
Yeah, for me, like I think it's like you can itch fund a total project from the very beginning. I think you just have to have at least something you can know you're going to give people. Yeah. And say this is what we know we're going to give you. The more we do, the more we can build on top of this. For me, every time I fund from this point on, I'll do some itch funding in advance to get us to where we want to be, and get that beta out there and let people get excited about it and get playing it, and support the full funding that we're going to do later on. For me, I think it's one of the best pathways we can take to small publication. There are some games I just published through Exalted Funeral though, right? Like that I just send Jarrett like, hey, here's a game Toaster that I made, which is my emotional processing of the trauma that Brave Little Toaster instilled in me in the 80s.
Yep, same. Same trauma, trust me.
It's an OSR game about playing as appliances, your small appliances in a big world. You've got an emotional core and you're just trying to do the best you can for your owner. without getting caught by anybody in high stakes, highly emotional situations. And so there's just again a lot of really fun stuff. But there are games I'll just pay them to pleasure. And then there are games I just like put out because I'm like I like this. It's done. Here it is. Sure. But for games I want to see grow, for bigger games, for games that are community oriented, those are the games I'll always take this pathway with.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's really interesting to see. Like, I had Jeff Stormer on. We talked about, anyone can wear the mask, which is also an itch funded game. We didn't really talk about the details of that too much. I think we did a little bit on the show. But yeah, I've been fascinated by like people looking for alternatives right now. Obviously, to Kickstarter, everyone is looking for alternatives. And I was going to ask you about because Down We Go was on GameFound. But that's really helpful for me to hear the clarification that I really like the idea of the two working together, the itch funding working in concert with GameFound for print stuff.
Yeah. And like people are like, well, then people have to pay twice. I'm like, no, they don't. Like they can wait and back on itch fund. You can get the core rules for $1 right now and come back around and get everything later. You can get it now if you just want the digital, which is what a lot of people do. And then you can grab some of the extras later on if you want to, or just retweet it. Like I don't, it's not. It's when we're dedicated to building games out the right way, we can make really intentional steps about how we get them into people's hands and let people start playing with them and making them their own at their table. When we put a big emphasis on just the crowdfunding campaign, we're divesting ourselves of a lot of our own agency by saying, oh, if I don't do that thing that's a cultural expectation, I'm never going to make it big. So the person whose segment we just unlocked, I want to talk about them for a second. So Nora Rose, who is the person in charge of Monkey Paw Games, which is a game design company as well as like distribution company up in Canada. So they are going to be doing a segment. So they're going to be creating some factions and and a location on the station and some NPCs and some events that we're going to throw into the mix along with 4 other creators, and then I'll finish out the other 60% of the station and those things. But they do a tremendous job of looking at alternate ways to help things come to market also. Like we do, they do. There's a lot of people out there right now. They just launched something called the Chapbook Co-op, which is basically saying if you've got a pamphlet size adventure that you want to get into print or a small zine that's print ready, like we want to print it for you, right? I'm super excited to be partnering with somebody who has a really strong ideological stance around what it means to help small, especially diverse creators make their games happen, because it's a passion of ours. They've partnered together with like 3 other different publishers across, 3 continents or through 2 continents and 3 different major geographic locations to be able to basically say, when we do this, when we make a game, it's all of a sudden going to be in these 4 locations. So like, I love working with people who have a bigger vision for what the indie scene can be, and who are phenomenal creators. And I also like to work with people who are like, I've found this small, precious gem of a game from, and maybe nobody's heard of them. And I want to bring them into the team in the middle of those people who are having huge impact and let everybody be equal to each other in the way that we were made to be, and watch the beautiful things that just kind of emerge out of that space. And so like having Nord do a segment, I was just thrilled because they do tremendous OSR design on their own when they said they were interested. But, I leaned in a couple people who I really loved working with last time to get that started, and then brought in immediately new creators who I didn't get to work with last time to start collaborating with and building that out and enriching kind of what Through the Void can do. So, and again, great creator. I'm super excited we unlocked that. When we get to 1,000, which we have kind of a little goal here, and then we've got our biggest goal is our top goal is 1,500. 1,000 is another drift or dungeon. Marcus Linderum, who's the original creator of Down We Go, is going to do that one. Also, I do know that when we get to 1,000, we have an unannounced stretch goal that somebody else, the folks over at Weave the Tale, said if we can hit that $1,000 stretch goal, they're just going to do another actual play for us promoting the game, and I'm going to hop in on that one so people will be able to play with the creator.
Nice.
And watch me play too. So I'm super excited about that. We'll announce that later this week formally. And then the $1,500 goal, which is bigger than the rest because it's a standalone pamphlet adventure, is going to be done by Lucas Rolam, who's a Latin American RPG creator, tremendous person who I really love interacting with online, who I love him and his family. I love watching the work that he and his brother, who's now passed, Diogo, have done, and it's just really amazing folks, and having him, and then Gnarled Monster, who does Beyond the Borderlands zines, do the artwork for that and collaborate together on that. It's huge. It's two collaborators. We're really committed to paying people well, so it's a little bit bigger of a thing. It also will have its own standalone print and art and setup and other stuff like that. So it's a little bit more of a goal, but it'll be not just one dungeon, but an actual adventure that you can kind of take your players on and through. And so I'm super excited to see what they create. But once we have that, that's it. That's kind of that's all the funding we're looking at for this first go round. But it'll give us all of our art. It'll give us, a number of dungeons people can get started with. It'll give us a huge section of the world, and it'll let people get it to the table and do whatever they want to do with it, so we can start getting their feedback and building the final version.
Cool. That's awesome. One of the things, Tony, that I love about what what I see you doing with Plus One Exp, that Plus One Exp has always done that I've seen, and I've always seen you do, which is lifting up like people basically. Like, I was gonna say get more specific than that, but really it's just lifting up like other people. And like I don't know if that's like something you intentionally have done from the beginning, like by design. It's like, okay, we're gonna make sure we're always lifting people up, or if it just comes naturally to your personality, or like maybe it's both.
Like, it's interesting. I am somebody who is incredibly, my natural impulse is critical. Not in a sense of turning the people down, but it's just I am the kind of person who takes in details very easily and makes complex connections between things. And so I tend to be very critical because it's just what my brain naturally does. By which I mean things like, I have never worked at a place that I've not figured out how I would rob blind if I wanted to. Not because I want to rob those places blind. I have zero desire to steal from my employer or anybody for that matter. My brain just notices that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Sure. Too many video games. I don't know. I do the same thing when I meet people. So I will immediately slide into like just taking in the details about this person, and I'll start to like it'll start to inform my mental picture of them and how they behave and other stuff like that on a fairly nuanced level. Like in some, it's such a cliche, especially with TikTok right now, to be like, as an empath, right? But in a lot of ways that are very empathic and very much designed to say, like, what does this other person in front of me need, want, desire? What are the good strengths that they bring to the table? What are the weaknesses and challenges in front of them? And really the only thing that means is I have choices about how I interact with that person. If I was a horrible person, I would be the worst manipulator in the world. And oftentimes I sometimes worry that is potentially a base part of who I am, is this secretly manipulative person. Because whenever I think about, whenever I have to play an evil character, I oftentimes just think, what are my worst base impulses and how do I feed that in, like as an NPC? Or we played a game by Black Fisk last year that was absolutely tremendous about toxic masculinity. And like, I was like, what if I just actually took the things I'm worried are my worst base impulses and had a character do that? And man, this guy was the worst. I was so glad when he got his throat slit at the end of the game. I worry about that. Yeah. I consciously think about that. And so it's not to counter that. But like, I grew up in a very generous household. We went from when I was very young being on the top end of impoverished to being my parents being upper middle class by the time I graduated, and very much having means. During that entire time, a big part of what my parents constantly demonstrated was how do we take care of each other. I was constantly engaged in service as a young person with both friends, and church youth group was a big part of that. I did a lot of different things, but for me, I was even talking to my kids about this the other day. At the end of the day, I want my kids to be good people who are also intellectually honest, more than anything else on a human level. And so that does motivate a lot of what I do. As a professional who's been most of their time in developing other people, a big part of how I'm wired because of all that is now also specifically to basically say, how do I help the person in front of me succeed, to experience a fuller version of life, or depending on what they're looking for, profession or success in a certain area. If I have an ability to help with that, how can I help with that? Is something that very much motivates who I am. So when we founded Plus One, from the get-go, like the content bard thing was already in play, and the concept of like what we really want to do is play a support utility role within the RPG field. Like, we don't care about being the best at anything. We care about taking the skills that I have and the team we're building has, and saying, what do we do to uplift the rest of the party? What do we do to give inspiration to people? What do we do to think about, how we can make the world a more beautiful and inspired place? That was absolutely baked in from the get-go. Now, along with that, because again, this is how my brain works, but intellectual honesty is important. I was like, I also know that those things are authority building and community building, and those are great marketing tools also too. So I know those things. I don't think those things exist in conflict with each other, as long as I know both of those things exist and I'm honest about how those things exist, and I keep one being the priority and the other one being the result.
I 100%
when those things get flip-flopped, that's when we get into problems.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I think that like you're a smart person. You know it's good marketing at the same time as being just the right thing to do. I mean, the people, there are people in this industry that I see who are just naturally like, who's just really, really good at just like lifting up, the things that other people do, the things other people are working on are really good at, and like genuinely celebrating that person and the things that they make. And you can tell when it's genuine and when it's not. That's the other piece of it, I think. Like, because a lot of, like, you see companies do a version of this, and I at least I can kind of tell when it's like, okay, that seems very disingenuous,
Right.
I think we can tell when it's genuine. And then like, we also kind of, I think, all understand, while it's genuine, we get it, it's baked in that's also going to be good for what you're doing and for like what you're building. Right. But that's okay when it's genuinely lifting up people up.
And like the real question for me is, at the end of the day, like, is it sacrificial? So, at least sometimes, right? And that can mean a lot of things, but like, if I'm only giving my time when somebody pays me for my time, that's not sacrificial. That's transactional, right? If I'm only giving my time when I know I'm going to get, or energy when I know I'm getting marketing boost out of it, that's not sacrificial, right? Like, I don't care. Like, I was super excited when you invited me to do it. Anytime anybody's interviewing one of my friends, I'm like, why haven't I been interviewed by that? You've interviewed so many of my friends. I'm just like, whatever.
You've been on my list. I just hadn't got to it. That's a whole nother story, and it's not.
But I'm always excited for them. But I'm also like the other day, a guy was like, I'm starting up a channel. I'm looking for people to come on, and I was like, I'd love to come on. Yeah. Like, nobody knows who you are. Nobody. And like, my immediate thing when I'm on, I was like, hey, I've got like, I'm hearing a buzz from you. It sounds like it may be a cable. Like, I'm like audio critiquing. I'm like, you don't want any of this. That's fine. I'm just letting you know. Don't stress about it before we go live. It's going to be so low. No one else is going to hear it. No one else is going to care. I'm just going to let you know, like, it's there. Yeah. And it was a great conversation, but like, they, I knew there would be like 2 or 3 people there that night, because it's the first week that they've been doing these things. Yeah. It's Eat, Crit, and Die. Everybody should go give them a follow over on Twitch. It was a great conversation. It was a lot of fun. They're just getting started in this space. And like, my hope is that like, hey, I want to come on your show. I want to share you with my platform. I want people to see that you're doing this, because like, you're like, a year ago, I was trying to figure out, how do I get people who I love, whose work I'm a big fan of, to pay attention to me, so because I want to help them, and what I can do to help them is not necessarily offer my 100 followers on YouTube or whatever it was at that point in time, but was creating professional quality content that they could use to showcase their game, and then pushing really hard if they were coming on my show to get their stuff out into the world, right? Like, and it was saying like, I can put in that time and energy, and I don't want this to be a transaction. Like, I want to do this in a way that is just me really taking my time, my energy, and my skills, and investing in you, because the game you have made means something to me. And along the way, whenever somebody was like, hey, I would love to come on and do that same thing. If I had never heard Brian Shutter, the second game we ever played on stream, maybe third game, was creating Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland. It was a blast to play. I love playing with Brian. I can't wait to play with Brian again now that the game's coming out. It was just a tremendously great experience. But like, literally saw me telling Diogo Nogueira that I wanted to have him on, because Diogo is somebody whose work I esteem very highly. And then he was like, can I get that also? And I was like, absolutely. Like, it's not like I'm going to say yes to I mean, I could have just been like, oh, we're really booked. Like, I don't know who you are. Like, I could have said that. It's like, yeah, absolutely. Why would I not? Why would I not have the person whose work I love, who has a name in the field, and the person who I've never heard of, who's just getting started? Like, I want both of those people here with me, because that's what, like, community doesn't consider, like, good community and healthy community doesn't consider those scales, right? And we notice and see those things a lot of the time. So when I say we don't consider those scales, it doesn't mean we're unaware of them. It means that the choices by which we operate on don't take those things into account when they're making decisions, because we know that, like, all of these things can be engaged in a sacrificial way, and that's actually when value starts to get added on a human level.
Yeah, I tried to. I hadn't, I guess, thought about my motivation for that until right now while I'm hearing you talk about it. I would say it's definitely, I mean, my show's small, but being small, it's not as if I also genuinely feel that way, where it's like, yes, I was very excited that I had James D'Amato come on this show, who has a huge following, and that was great for my show. And James, for the record, didn't have to do my show, but did it because he builds up the community. But also, if I have somebody who I've never heard of and certainly has like a lower following than me on whatever social media platform that might be, like, I want that person on my show too. I want to talk about their games, and plus, people are that person's genuinely going to be extremely interesting. Have interesting insights to offer me that I'm going to learn from. I'm going to learn stuff about their game. Their game's going to be awesome, and if I can shed some light to their game, I'd like to. But I never really reflected on like the sort of personal motive. I mean, that is also a religious value of mine, right? Like not showing partiality between people based on their status is legitimately like a Jesus like teaching and a like genuine like religion principle that I hold. But I never connected it, I guess, to like stream shows in my mind. But
well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's really interesting. Like, I remember we were in the middle of Down We Go. We use this as maybe a little bit of a pivot point. Like, we were in the middle of Down We Go. And so, like, and for anybody out there who doesn't know, like, I'm Catholic. It's not really a secret at all. Like, it comes up very commonly in stuff that we do. But it's also not something that I'm just like we're not a Catholic channel. We're not, like the company itself, though I operate based on values that I've learned and articulate through my face, and I don't run counter to my values because I would never want anybody to. Then the question becomes like how are those things manifested? And it comes up in just a ton of different like interesting ways. But we were in the middle of Down We Go, and I had just had the experience of somebody essentially trying to dox me for being Catholic, as if I, like, to a certain degree, as if I would have cared. But also like in a kind of weird menacing way where they had dug really deep in and found like somebody who was connected to somebody who was connected to an organization I used to be a part of, that they were like, well, what do you think about this? I was like, I don't know. It's bad and dumb. If you want me to get it taken off that site, I don't work there anymore, but I'll email the people who do and see if they'll take it down. Cause like when I was working there, I was trying to get all that guy's stuff removed, and they were like, oh, thanks. Right. Which is great. And I was able to take that, which was kind of a very kind of weird thing that happened, and turned it into, yeah, this was actually problematic for me when I worked there. I followed up with them. They took off the article and a couple of other things that were issues and just kind of removed all that from the site. It was a good resolution, but it was a weird approach. And it had made me kind of like really like self-conscious, because I'm very aware of the amount of trauma, religious trauma, and you experience the same thing, I'm sure. The amount of religious trauma that people experience is not insignificant. More traditional forms of the faith oftentimes have been more complicit in inflicting trauma on people than more recently emergent denominations within Christianity, which is what I'm specifically talking about, the realms of Christianity. And so Catholics, Anglicans, Lutherans, Episcopalians, like, y'all are going to fall wherever, on that spectrum, depending on how long that Episcopal branch of the Episcopalian Church has been around. But the amount of religious trauma we've institutionally inflicted on people is high. We have to be totally aware of that anytime we're in those conversations. And with this having come up right then, and realizing, okay, like, someone was worried, and even though that worry was false, and even though it was kind of some sort of weird thing that they brought to me that was very disconnected from me, like, I have a ton of people in this community that I love that also have experienced that, right? And somebody who from Italy interviewed me about that, and they were like, I technically view almost everything I do as evangelization and missionary work, in some capacity. And they were like, in the middle of an interview about Down We Go, they had a question in there about what is it like to be a Catholic missionary? How does your Catholic faith influence what you do? Da, da, da. And I was like, hey, I would love to answer this question. What I'm going to ask you as the author, because I wasn't expecting it, but I'm happy to answer it, is if you'll just spoiler my responses, and that if we can put this note at the top, just to like anybody who has religious trauma, like realize this, if you want to stop reading this interview now, that's fine. If you decide that because of who I am, you don't want to back the game, I totally understand that. But I've also asked that my answer to this question be spoiled. If you want to read it, feel free to, but also feel free to just skip to the next question if you want to, right? Just being very aware that I was going to answer openly and honestly about who Jesus is, why they matter in my life. But also, I don't need to be imposing that on anybody, because all I want to do is create a sense of invitation and curiosity around that, not wound someone with it because they've already got something else that causes that those statements or those conversations to be damaging to them. And I did it, and I was very, because of everything that had just happened, nervous about the response. And like it came out, and that day I got 2 or 3 messages on Discord and on Facebook, because I'm old, by friends of mine who have religious trauma, who read that section because they know me, and talked about how healing it was to hear me frame things the way that I'd frame them and talk about things the way that I did, and how appreciative they were of how respectful I was of preparing whoever was reading the article to do that. And like, for me, that's what I live for. For me, the like, I'm never going to be like, stick around after the actual play so we can talk about Jesus. But I'll have people every once in a while who are like, hey, can I stick around and just ask you a couple of things? They may want to ask us a very specific question about faith. They may want to ask, as a person of prayer, like, they may be very clear, like they don't believe in prayer, but like, as a person of prayer, would I pray for this thing for a family member or something else? It may be about why other Christians are assholes, which are among my favorite conversations to talk about, because they are, and I get it. Like, I mean, I have been, I grew up in the South. I've certainly been. But people who have shared with me very intimate details about non-religious trauma that they've experienced, but around maybe a moral issue that they know the church has a stance on, and they want a better understanding of because someone else from the religious right is hurting them, right? And they want to know why I don't do that, basically, why I don't hurt them, which is, I think, one of the nicest things I can hear is like, I don't think, like, I hate, like, these other Christians are hurting me, but in the middle of that, you are safe, and I need to talk to someone about this. Those are some of the most beautiful conversations where people will express, regardless of any conversion, which is not the goal of those conversations, a deep appreciation on a spiritual level of the ability to have that conversation, to hear a clean and honest, loving articulation of the faith that seeks what's highest for them. There's not a month that goes by where I don't get to have 2 or 3 of those conversations. Wow. And those are like, and again, I want to be very clear with anybody. Like, I have a company that I run that does a ton of Catholic stuff and ministry stuff, and that's how I make my money, and that's what lets me do all my weird gaming stuff. None of my weird gaming stuff is contrived to trick anyone into having those conversations, to force anyone into having those conversations. It is literally the fact that I love these things, and I'm going to bring everything I am to them, and I want you to bring everything you are to them. And I want us to meet there and be together there, and I want you to feel seen and heard and known and loved in the middle of all that, right? That's what I want at Plus One, and that's going to be on a human level, 99.99999% of the time. And then every once in a while, somebody's going to ask a question about something deeper, right? Or have a spiritual response. And I'm excited about that. Like, I'm thrilled for that. Like, I have the patient anticipation of a fisherman in those moments. Not that I've hooked someone, but that the thing that I love most in the world, getting to engage deeply in the spiritual reality of someone's life, is making itself manifest in that moment. I love that. That's my jam.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, certainly mine too. It's why I felt called to be a priest. It's something that I absolutely adore. I don't get to do it very much in this. Well, I mean, I do this show. I talk to people about their spiritual life all the time in the context of like an interview. I wonder. I'm thinking like I haven't had a lot of those impromptu kind of conversations you're talking about, and I often think maybe part of that is that there's like a clerical thing to it. You know what I mean? Like I try to be disarming, but I am a priest, and that can be pretty intimidating to a lot of people.
Yeah, clericalism is alive and well in the West. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, even as much as that's shifted and changed, like, I mean, certainly from the tradition I come from, it's evident and it's abusive, and there's a lot of other issues that come into play with it. And again, like, this is why I always lead with like, I care mostly about intellectual honesty. Like, these are all real things. There's some of that. I think it's almost easier. Like, a lot of times when people approach me, like, they'll say things like, well, I really like it that you're one of those Christians who, which is always an interesting thing to see what comes next. Just kind of keeps your faith to yourself and kind of keeps it over in the corner. And I was like, it's interesting. Because my opinion of myself is actually the opposite. Like, it influences everything that I do. It influences every single thing that I do. And I think the people who you're upset with, who are hurting you, who you don't like, actually are the people for whom they have compartmentalized some aspect of their faith and are not living it fully integrated. And that is why they are hurting you and hurting other people. That is where we see the problem. And so to say to you, like, because you're living as a priest, it is evident, right? And unless somebody doesn't know you're a priest, there's kind of no sideways about it, right? Like, for me, it's people come to know it very quickly. Whenever anybody's coming into our streaming community, I've only ever told one person in advance because they were coming in blind, and they sent me a few writing samples, and one of them was about their experiences as a gay POC. With the Catholic Church specifically, and I just messaged them. I just want to be upfront with you. This is who I am. This is where I'm coming from. And I would, and we have played sessions together. Like, we have a good relationship. I want you to know this in advance, so that at no point ever do you think this is some sort of weird bait and switch. Right. Like, that's the only person I've ever told, like, crazy upfront. Like, here's who I am. Right. Everybody else, it's not hidden at all. But like, for 95% of the time, it's like, that's not why we're starting this conversation. We're starting this conversation because I want to play games with you. And so, like, why would I start that with, I want to play games with you, but I just really need you to know I'm obnoxiously Catholic before we do that. The reality is, like, for a lot of people, I think it's more of I think those who are hurting other people are people who sense disintegration, right? But I would also say, for you specifically, I don't think that you're not hurting anybody. You're doing the opposite, right? Like, you're doing the same thing, but the clerical reality does bring in, like, they probably know that about you from like, no one's coming on that Gamer Priest channel and being like, wait a minute. You're a priest who plays games, Whereas for me, they're encountering somebody for whom they don't know how that's going to manifest, right? Like, they don't know what that looks like. You're able to surprise them in different ways than I'm able to surprise them, right? You're and they're going to come to you in different ways and with different things. And that's like, I mean, like, we see this as part of the beautiful expression of the faith, right? As far as giftedness, as far as being parts of the same body, and I love that, right? And I get jealous of other people's stuff sometimes, and I wish I was doing it. And then, like, I get to do the thing I do really well, and I just forget about that, Like, because there are parts about being a priest that I'll never get to experience, right? And that's a really beautiful thing. I was watching on TikTok, because I'm an elder millennial too, so I'm on Facebook and TikTok. I'm the ultra cringe. Anyways, I was watching. There's a priest, and I'm trying to remember her name. She's Episcopalian. She's I think she's pregnant right now. She's absolutely beautiful soul. And she was talking about the theology of in persona Christus, which is like in the person of Christ, right? Which oftentimes people think is reserved for clergy, and historically that's a lot of how that doctrine in the West was unpacked. Like, the priest operate in the person of Christ during sacramental realities, right? And a lot of Anglicans, Catholics, Orthodox, and some other folks, like that's a very much a part of their thing. But like in as theology is unwound around that within the Catholic context, like what we've really come to say is like the common priesthood experiences what it means to be in the person of Christ, right? Like every Christian, by virtue of their baptism, actually experiences what it means to act as Christ in some capacity. Priests get to act in persona Christus Capitas, as the head of the person of Christ in certain circumstances. Like I'll never get the chance to do that. I'm not saying you have to oblige to that spiritual tradition. That's not part of it. Right? But like, but you will get to operate in a way that I want, and that's beautiful, and I love that. It's also very relieving for me. But there are going to be times I'm 100% like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, and so I see one of the things that is, as like a church leader, as a parish priest, right, as a pastor of a community, I try to like lift up, I think, you know, like the gifts of, because of that clericalism. Like I want to show people sort of like, okay, I do operate in this one distinct way. I operate at the table. I officiate over the sacraments. And you can't do that. Like, you know, and when I say you, I mean the people in my congregation, and you personally, right. But people in my congregation can't do that because of
can't stop me in my own house.
Yeah, right, exactly. But like what I try to I guess what I try to convey to people is like, that distinction is like you mentioned, a body of Christ, right? Like, in fact, actually in the lectionary, which is for listeners, the watchers, the Sunday readings, this last Sunday's New Testament text was Paul articulating this idea of the body, right? Like a foot isn't a hand and an eye isn't, you know, and so like trying to like level, so it's not like, you know, this exactly where I'm at the top and everyone's below me, but it's like, no, you have your gifts that you're bringing. I operate in this function, you operate in this function, and I can't operate in your function any more than you operate in mine. So I could try to, you know, and I find the way to kind of teach that, the only way to really teach that, as a way of thinking about it dogmatically, is to like lift up the gifts of the people in my congregation, in their uniqueness, in their beautifulness. Like, you know, you're awesome because you can do this. I can't do that. Like, you know, and that's the only way I found to like teach that.
And to flip this all back around, like for how any of this matters, right? Yeah. Like this is exactly what we were talking about with, I don't care how big your stream is. Yeah. I don't care how big your game is. I don't care if it's your first design. I don't care if it's your, you know, millions of them. Like I'm looking for the beautiful thing that you can bring to a conversation that no one else can. I'm looking to play your game because it is a unique expression of the world that you're trying to articulate. And that is exciting to me, right? That is like, so for me, as far as design philosophy goes, like I am a open the world, enter the world, explore the world, exit the world, close the world designer. Doesn't necessarily have to make any sense to anybody, but like I very much operate on the sense of every single time we sit down to play, not just to design, we are creating a world in which we are defining it, we are choosing to enter into it, we are exploring it together, we're choosing to exit it, and we're choosing to close it up. And we may come back to that world at some point in time. Right, we may play there some more, but we may just go on to do something different, and like to explore the infinite realities of play within that concept. Like to me, is a very, very divine experience. And like my background, in addition to being in evangelization work, was in youth work. Like I just started with like pro-social gaming, so I was developing like weekend-long, large-scale, like LARPy experiences where teenagers and adults would come out and like there would be a conceit of like, it could be like Survivor themed, right? I know this sounds like old school, like weird hat youth, but like we would do it to the nth degree. Like we would crash a bus at the edge of the property and it would start sinking and everybody would have to get their stuff off in a hustle, like for a Survivor weekend, like, and put them in canoes, right? And like walk them up to like wherever we were going. Like, and then like, it'd be like, okay, like the boats are still sinking. You got to get rid of most of your stuff. And the kids would think like, oh, we're living with just this stuff for the weekend. But it was like, we would videotape everything. We would edit them into things. This is 2 decades ago when this was not the normal thing to do. But the goal was to create a world that these people were coming out to and entering into for a retreat experience over the course of the weekend, that they could play around and they could explore, that we could have conversations and questions about. And you'd have these like mind-blowing expressions of the depths and beauty of a middle school student's soul when they would say things like, like, hey, like we're doing this, you know, and they would be hitting those higher lessons, right? Like why do we have to have some people over here and us over there? Because it just seems like a consequence. So wouldn't it be better if we were all together and just kind of shared everything in common? And I'm like, yes, it would be. That's like, we'll get there tomorrow. Don't worry. Like, you know, well, you know, like at the same time, there's, you know, fart jokes going off everywhere. Like, I mean, like, you know, but it would be encountered and experienced through play. So I was designing these like if you've ever asked me if I was a LARP designer, I would say no, but I did pro social gaming design. So I developed thematic weekend-long low and high rope experiences that were designed to teach and form an individual to become richer versions of themselves, specifically within the context of the Catholic tradition. And that is such an amazing entry point into games. And like I've had Jian Shim on my show a couple of times now, and it all Eli Seitz, Adira, and a number of the rest of us, like we look back and we're all very different people. We all have very different faiths, but like we're all camp people, right? And camp is such an interesting place to start playing around with design and to think about play and games and other things like that. And there's a lot of people in the ttrpg space for whom that's a common thread, is like, yeah, we all ran camp stuff, and we all had to figure out how to make a weekend amazing on a $20 budget. and now we make RPGs. And so, but all of those different things that matter to me in my faith, like, come into play. So when somebody's like, hey, why does any of this matter? Does it impact work? Like, how could it not? How could it not? Like, if this matters to me at all, how could it not impact everything that I do? The difference being, I don't expect other people to believe the same thing I do.
Right.
Like, and this is what I propose for myself. And this is what I hesitate to even say works for me, though that is probably a good secular articulation of this. This is what has allowed me to become the person I was made to be in the fullest sense of that, and a reflection of what I consider the highest and most divine person. That said, I can't just give that to somebody, and it would not be right for me to force anybody into that, because Jesus Christ himself didn't force me into it, nor did my parents, nor did anybody else. I was allowed to explore and discover it on my own, which is why it is so fully integrated into who I am. And I desire that for other people, knowing that I have zero control over that process, and not desiring any control over that process. And so I love in everything I do to be potentially a moment of an encounter with the divine when I'm at my best, and at my mediocrest, just a good friend to play games with. Right?
There you go. Yeah, and I one of the things I was thinking about this past week is, so my religious order that I'm a part of in the Episcopal Church, we use a non-Anglican book for our daily office book altogether. We use this book, I happen to have it here because it's at my desk, but we use this Celtic daily prayer book from the Northumbria community. They're like Baptists, basically, who run an intentional community in Scotland and Northumbria, or in UK, I guess, wherever it is in UK. Not Scotland. That's Iona I'm thinking of. But anyway, they like so I start my day with their morning prayer rather than like ours, so it's a little bit different than like say the Catholic or the Episcopal morning prayer service. But there's like this opening to it every day, which is just from Scripture, but it's what I start my day saying every day, and that's like it's a question and answer, call and response form. Even if I'm doing it alone, it's question and answer, and it's who is it that you seek? And it's, we seek the Lord our God. And do you seek him with all your heart? And then ask, do you seek him with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength? And I realized, like, this last week as I was doing this, I've done this for years and years and years, I realized, like, oh, like, this is like setting my intention for this day that I'm going into. And if I legitimately do that in my day, if this is really my intention for my day, like seeking Christ in with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, like what does that actually mean for my day? And I realized that it means looking for the opportunities to meet God and the divine in like every person I'm interacting with, like in the face of other people, in the voice of other people, especially people who are different than me. And like realizing that and going into my day with that is just so different than when I don't. And so like I try to like, see like where's God meeting me out there, not even just like, because it's so easy, especially as a priest, for me to think like, how can I be Christ for people, which I think is important, but also like, where can I meet Christ in others that I wouldn't even expect to hear him or see him speak to me or whatever. So I just, thinking about that lately in my sort of daily life, like, well, oh, okay. So this is setting an intention for me every day. Even as a priest, I can very easily go through several days in a row without thinking much about that. And, but yeah.
No, it's always interesting, like how easy it is, regardless, I think, of your philosophical or spiritual disposition, for us to get slid out of that, for a moment, and to not like, I mean, it's pretty normal, but to be like, I think it is oftentimes like curious that like, I know what it is like to be the most integrated version of myself, but it's pretty easy for me to not do the work that it takes to walk around like that all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's real easy. And so, and it is so effortless when it happens, but so seemingly impossible to maintain. And I don't think like, I think that has to do largely with the human condition, though we could theologize about it to any degree we wanted to. Like we can just talk about it being the human condition. And like for me, there's the prayer text that when I'm doing well, I read every day, called Divine Intimacy. But the biggest shift for me was it's a daily prayer book. It's based on the previous incarnation of the Roman liturgical calendar, so the 1 year cycle, not the 3 year cycle we currently use. But it's really designed to create intimacy with God and others. And it's interesting how doing that prayer practice for just 2 years like shifts our understanding of intimacy back to like the unitive reality and experience that we desire to have with others and with God. Right. That like in America, intimacy has become kind of something in the West, I should say, especially that we just think of within the erotic context, right? Or maybe with really close friends, as opposed to thinking like, what does intimacy mean with people who we don't have trust with? And what does intimacy mean with people who may need to safeguard themselves in some capacity to protect themselves, and that we should be respectful of that? What does it mean with our children, right? What does it mean with our coworkers? Because like for me, at the end of the day, like this deeper understanding of like what in the book they would call the abyssal reality of God's love, which we tend to think about abyss as being this negative absence of things, but it really just means like an unknowable expanse, right? The abyssal reality of God's love, the unending, unyielding, incomprehensible concept of how big God's love is, and how do we let that come to rest in our hearts, right? And how do we let that be more manifest in everything that we do? And yeah, like it's easy for me at any point in time to let that reality slip out of my mind. It's something that you can bathe and float in, and feel like you're having a transcendental experience in. And you can usually go like maybe like in my experience, like everybody's experience may vary. In my experience, I can make it about a month in that before something that will bump me out. And that's the longest I've ever gone. Usually it's like 15 minutes.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, so like does like for people, maybe who aren't retreat goers or something, even the most groundbreaking, life-changing, like amazing experience, high mountaintop retreat experience I've ever had in my life, where I felt like I really connected with God in this thing, maybe a week, like that, that high lasted maybe before I came crashing down from it on the other side. That's my experience too. It's just like, it's natural. I think it's natural. It's human.
Yeah. Well, like think about it, like for people who maybe have ever had the ecstatic religious experience,
Sure.
like when you have a really great session, right? Like you can tell there's a sense of communion and connectivity between the players at the table. You're diving into really rich themes. Dice rolls are going good and bad, but every single beat, the narrative is being driven forward. You're consumed and brought into this beautiful experience of play with people, right? And you all at the end of that session, like sit back and you're satisfied by the narrative and human experience that you just had with each other, right? Invariably, someone at your table is still just going to make a dumb joke at the beginning of the next session, and you're going to be back to square one, right? And you'll eventually hit those points again. But I mean, like that's really like in honesty, and like we have those moments when we're sitting with friends for a good meal and a lot of whatever drink is healthy and appropriate for you, and we're able to just be in community with each other. Like we hit those moments on a very natural human level a lot of the time. So I just want to affirm anybody who's like, I don't know what spiritually you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
Like we have those moments on a grounded human reality also too. And then we just get knocked out of them. Right. But yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest examples of that kind of experience that I had, it's not obviously like that I sometimes will articulate to people, is like the first time I went to PAX. Like, not even PAX Unplugged, I mean like PAX East, which was my first PAX. I went to the first couple of those. And the first couple of PAXs were like such like, I would describe it as being like a spiritual experience. It was certainly like an ecstatic type experience. It was like connecting with all these people on some deep, meaningful level, and like just like mind blowing. And like so I tell people that a lot of times, because that's nothing religious seemingly about that, right? It's not. But this is a pretty much spiritual high experience that I had.
And like the people I oftentimes have these experiences with, like, because it's really sad, like within like the richness of the Christian tradition, most of the stuff that we're talking about, like the average person who goes to church on Sunday, they may never experience in their life either. Like and that's not meant to be judgmental. Like there's shit ton of data that'll back that up. But I would also say within the white Christian tradition, specifically of the West, we've abandoned so much of this stuff, right? We love to quote the Desert Fathers, but that just really kind of illuminates our obsession with the intellectual realities of the faith, because it's like we'll read them and we'll quote them, but will we live like them? Absolutely not. It's so much easier for me to oftentimes have that connection or sense of presence with people who are not even Christian. Part of that's how I'm wired, right? Part of that's me as somebody who's wired to spend time with people who are far from God and to love them with zero expectation, but an infinite amount of hope for the best in their lives, right? But like the best conversations I've had in the last year with people have been with non-Christians. Jay Dragon just comes to mind immediately as somebody who like we will start talking about game design stuff, and we will into world building. We'll talk about like the seasons changing and other stuff like that. And we will end up into deep spiritual conversations. We will talk for 3 or 4 hours. And Jay's background is like Viking, like Nordic pagan stuff, and makes phenomenal games and is a very different person than I am. And I still would rather talk to Jay about spiritual realities than almost anybody else, because I can tell that we both desire and hunger for and have experienced similar things that have been transformative for us, even if the words we might use to describe them are completely different, and the way that they integrate into our lives are completely different. And that matters, right? And that might be a moment of like deconstruction for some people, which is fine. Like it's good to start asking questions when those things come up. For me, those have always been moments of intense consolation because of the transcendental way in which I view God acting in the world manifest itself. but it's always one of the most interesting things to me that is oftentimes where I find myself experiencing most consolation, is the furthest I could possibly be from the organized church, and then just in the middle of humanity.
Yeah. So, Tony, you're going to have to come back on Holy Happy Hour so we can talk more about theology, more about this stuff. I'm sure there'll be other games. Not that this was just because you have the game crowdfunding. Actually, is not.
No. We've been talking about getting together forever.
Yeah, but I'm sure there'll be other games that are crowdfunding you can come on and talk
Absolutely.
about too. And we got to have you come back on and talk more so we have more of this conversation. Plus, we didn't even get to talk about. What I really want to talk about sometime next time you come on, maybe we can get around to it, is talking about this idea, because I keep teasing it out on this show and I'm developing thoughts about it, just like what it would mean to like develop a Christian game in some good way. Because
did you not hear Bible 5e is funded on Kickstarter now?
That's what I mean.
This stream brought to you by Bible 5e. It was a trick the whole time.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Someone said disaster tourism.
American Christian bait and switch.
I love the chat blew up at that. Classic Christian.
Can I share a beautiful story around
please.
that?
Yeah.
Real quick, about the most beautiful thing to come out of Bible 5e.
Sure.
For one thing, I do have a game that I tweeted about this the other day, and I don't know if you've seen it or not, called Small Cults, that I want to make.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that, but we ran out of time.
We can do it. I would love to.
All right, great.
But about cults of devotion and how pious legends go off the rails, but how at the core of those there still is something beautiful that's trying to be expressed, and being able to explore that narratively at the table. Whatever.
Love it.
So my friend Keegan and I, like, as soon as Bible 5e popped up, messaged me and was like, look at this. I'm looking at this. It's a train wreck. And I'm like, but I buy kitsch, weird, bad Western. It's usually Protestant, but not always Bible stuff. Like I have shelves of it, because I love it. It's so bad. I love it. It's like it's not even McDonald's. It's like the gas station hamburger. Like it's the bomb burrito you get at the gas station. We're like, this is actively bad for me, and I know it. It's all I want right now. And it's just gonna go on this. I'm never gonna play Bible 5e for numerous reasons. But I backed it at a physical level. Keegan had backed it at a digital level. Keegan is not Christian. We're like giggling about it constantly. Like we're messaging each other back and forth. I was like, yeah, my biggest regret is that I've never got the Testament 3.5 edition game. Like there's all these older games. So Keegan, so Aaron, another one of our mutual friends, Aaron King, and Keegan and Joe, Keegan's husband, worked together to get me. Aaron found a copy. He was going to send it to Keegan, because Keegan had been very public about criticizing that the game also too. He's like, no, Tony needs it. So they sent it to me as my birthday present earlier this month. So one good thing has come out of Bible 5e, and that is that I got a copy of Testament for 3.5 edition. Dungeons and Dragons, really which is the previous, much better than Bible RPG in 5th edition.
If people want to know my thoughts on the Bible 5e, I made a the biggest thing I ever did on Twitter was that my thread on Bible 5e, which for me blew up, and I took that to be a lot of people cared and wanted to and had an interest in it. And you know what was really weird about that, and then we can wrap up here, but what was really interesting about that is that, you know, anytime anyone puts a thread about something, especially something like this, like Bible 5e, you know, you expect, like, especially when it gets seen like 12,000 times, you know, like you expect negative comments, right? You expect something negative because it's Twitter, it's the internet, whatever. I got no negative responses to my thread about Bible 5e at all. I was waiting for, like, because I was kind of critical of them using D&D, so like I was expecting D&D Twitter somebody might comment. I was expecting like Christian Twitter, someone might evangelical Christian Twitter, someone might comment. I got no negative comments, and I don't know if that's because I tried really hard to critique it while being respectful, because I did try really hard to like be as respectful as I could for something I don't really respect. I was trying to.
I just feel like that game's going to be the ultimate potential player flip, where you're like. Just look at the GM straight in the eye and be like, I killed John the Baptist. What do you do now? What do you do, GM? What are you doing now? Like, I feel like there's just so many ways that you could just upend the plot of that game. Like, it's just such, and like oh my god, like even from a biblical literacy point, it's
I know that was one of my biggest problems.
So garbage. Yeah. And like that's my thing. Like y'all like consistently don't do like, and that's like when I worked in a church before, I was like, Tony, why don't you make a cool Catholic game for all the kids to play? And I was like, I mean, literally, like conversation I had numerous times. Two answers, right? Well, because Catholic games are all shit.
Yeah, right.
And faith is not a game.
Right.
Like those are my two consistent responses. Now, do I secretly desire that? And do like my friend Alexi from Cloven Pine Games has a game called, we played it on stream around Halloween, Autumn Triduum, which is about nuns fighting the forces of evil at the remote convent.
Sounds like someone I need to have on the show. But
you should. He and his spouse both are absolutely phenomenal. Tremendous game, tremendous experience. Play. It's one of my favorite games. And I put out to Alexia, like, if you can't find a publisher in the next 2 years, like we're gonna put it out. It's like I absolutely like cannot wait, and I love playing the game whenever we can. And I played it with totally mixed crowds, and everybody's like, this is so much more fun than I thought. And the game has a lot of like visual, and like the moves are like spiritual and corporal works of mercy. The 3 stats are faith, hope, and charity. It's written in the classic form of the rubrics, so red and black, and
wow.
Like like
I need to know more about this game.
It's so good. Anyways,
yeah.
But yeah, I just there are some good things out there, but like to me, like it's just so weird that people get into all that stuff and not at all what I want. But I've just played so many bad Christian games. I'm just like, I'm fine.
And that's why I want to, think more about like what it means to make a good Christian game. Like, because I have had, and the impetus for it was really in some ways that I've had so many really amazing Jewish game designers on talking about their like being a Jewish game designer. And it's like, I part of me wants that to exist for Christianity.
And that's like, that's small cults, right? Small cults is saying, we're going to examine weird, pious legend realities around things that's proper to our tradition. We're not stealing it from somebody else.
Right.
We want to engage in that. But, and not to be bullshitty, because it certainly is, there's a lot of bullshit in this statement. Through the Void's a great Christian game. Like, go back it right now. Does it have anything to do with Christianity? No. Was it designed by somebody whose faith influences every piece of their design ethos and the way that they build development teams? Absolutely. Do you have to know any of that to play it and have a great time? Not at all. Go back Through the Void right now.
I love it. There you go. Well, that's a good note to end on. Go back Through the Void right now. We had some people back during the stream, which is so freaking awesome. So
yeah, we broke a pledge level.
Really excited about that. So Tony, thanks for coming on the show. I do legitimately will have to get you back on. We can have more of this conversation. I would love to have you on again. So thanks for making the time to come on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm going to send Tony back to his yeah. Exactly. And now it's just me. He's gone forever. Except for still on my screen. Anyway, so here we are to get into the show, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out in the chat. Thank you for chatting with us and watching the stream tonight. I really appreciate y'all being here with us. Huge thanks again to Tony for being on the show. Oh, I didn't give him the chance to say, where he is on Twitter, but search for Plus One Exp wherever you can, and you can use the link there in the chat to check out the game as it's funding. Go back it. That's my recommendation to you all. And everything that Plus One Exp does is awesome, and you should all follow on every format you possibly can, every social media you can, here on Twitch. Great streams, really, really great streams. So I'm at my desk all day long, and so there's a lot of times where I can just pop in and watch a stream, and I just freaking love it. So I think you will too. So please don't forget to hit the follow button on this stream if you don't mind. I would love to have you follow us here, That Gamer Priest on Twitch, or you can consider subscribing to our channel, to my channel. Now, if you only caught part of tonight's show with Tony, you'll be able to head to allportsopen.com to watch every episode of the show afterward. I only just tonight started streaming the show back to a to a YouTube channel for Holy Happy Hour. So it was That Gamer Priest on YouTube. It is now just Holy Happy Hour Batman on YouTube. So you can now watch every episode of the show there on the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can see every episode there. We're streaming live there, so you might be watching this there right now. If so, hi. You can watch every episode after the fact there. Please check out more of the great shows on our All Ports Open network, as I mentioned. You can see all of them at allportsopen.com. But this Wednesday, I would love it if you all would join us for character creation for Big Time Space, our Wednesday comedy sci-fi show that we're doing. Character creation this coming Wednesday. We're going to be making some Troika characters. Troika is such a fabulous game. I cannot wait to play it. I'm really looking forward to that. So huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, for the artwork on the stream that you see, this overlay in front of you, and everything Josh does for the network. Thanks to Dr. Octorock for the use of his music on the show, and for creating the Big Time Space theme song for Wednesday nights. So we have our own theme music, which is freaking awesome. Okay, I'm That Gamer Priest, Ben. I will be back next week, and I have to remember who is coming on the show, because I didn't originally plan on having an episode tonight, and I was very grateful Tony was able to come on. Oh, that's right. We have got a great game designer next week. Whitney Delaglio is coming on. Whitney designed Prism, is coming on to talk to me about conflict resolution in games. Whitney's just a really awesome person in the ttrpg scene, and I'm really excited to have Whitney on the show. So that's next Wednesday, January 31st, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then February 7th, we've got a guest coming back on the show. Another Philly native, Greg Loring Albright, is coming back on the show, this time by himself. He's going to be talking about Block by Block, which is a game, the newest version of the game he's creating. He is designing the newest version of Block by Block. It's a new edition of that game, is my understanding. So he's going to be coming on the show to talk about that. And, oh, hey, someone in the chat says, Disaster Tourism says, I know Greg. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't think the audio... Okay, so Disaster Tourism's got to come on the show, Philly person. Awesome, I love it. Well, we'll have to talk afterward then, maybe. And we all might be in there's a Philly TTRPG chat for that. But, all right, so let's see. What else do I have coming up? Oh, and we mentioned Adira Slattery on the show tonight. Adira's coming on the show February 28th. Oh, and I know I almost skipped undoubtedly the most important episode of the show I will ever make, which is on February 14th, Valentine's Day. My own wife and my counterpart on our podcast, Pot of Love, Melissa Wallace, is coming on the show on Valentine's Day. My own Valentine. So okay, all right. That is it. We are not raiding into another show tonight. So everyone, thank you so much for watching the show. It might say raid coming soon in a second, because I forgot to switch the overlay when I switch it over, but there is no raid tonight. Thank you for watching. There's no Monday night show for the worst days, so thanks for hanging out. I hope you all had the holiest and happiest of hours here, and I'll see you all next week. Bye bye.